Teamwork in business. You'll find in this course that I emphasize working in groups and teamwork. It's an essential part of being in a business, working in teams. Whether you're working with your suppliers, other employees, you're a manager, you have to work with your groups. Business is about teamwork. And so we're going to emphasize that. Your homeworks will be done primarily in groups. Now there's techniques and things you can learn about how different people work in groups and the group dynamics. And we're going to talk about some of those today, and we'll talk about those throughout the semester. If you don't like working in groups, this is not going to be a good course for you. That said, I know that working in groups is very difficult, particularly at a non-residential college where everybody commutes in. That's why I give you 2 weeks to do your homeworks. I believe you can do these homeworks on your own in easily less time than that. The difficulty is going to be working in groups. I think you'll also find that working in groups, you can potentially get a much better product than if you worked alone. But that depends upon you and how your group works. I just want to emphasize a few concepts in this video. And the first concept is the stages of team formation. All groups go through these stages. Your groups will go through these stages. Business groups go through these stages. Sports groups go through these stages. All groups. And the first stage is forming. The group gets together. Well, when can we meet? What time? Where will we meet? Who's going to do what? What are we going to do? What do we have to do? How can we split this up? Or are we all going to do our pieces and bring them together? By the way, I highly recommend for the homework assignments, do them yourself and then get together in a group and pick the best of everybody's ideas. If you don't, what happens? Well, if you split the thing up into 4 different pieces and everybody does their part, well, what happens if somebody doesn't deliver? Or what happens if somebody doesn't deliver a quality product? So I highly recommend do it on your own. You'll also learn the most doing it that way. All right, so forming. What are we doing? How do we get this done? You then transform to the storming phase. Well, we were meeting at 11 o'clock. Where were you? How come you didn't show up? You were late. You were supposed to bring this. You didn't. Why not? I thought I was doing that. All of these things will happen in your homework groups. They also happen in the business world. Exactly the same sort of thing. Why didn't you do this? You owed this to me on Wednesday. Why didn't I get this? Go through the storming phase. This is natural. I thought I was in charge. Oh, I'm telling you, who's the leader? That sort of thing. And typically out of the storming phase emerges a leader. And you eventually get to the norming phase. You get to work as a group. You figure it out. You meet your deliverables, the things you owe as a group or a business. You can deliver them. That's the norming phase. You meet your objectives. Now, if groups stay together long enough, they will transform into the performing stage. You get really good at stuff. Right? You will be able to get your work done. I might assign something and you'll know exactly what to do. You know when you're meeting, you know how you're doing it, you know what you do. It becomes very efficient in terms of getting things done at the lowest cost and not having to fight and storm and things like that. That's the performing stage. All groups go through this. We'll talk more about this later in the semester. But sports groups, business groups, and your homework groups. Now, another thing to notice, and this is important to get right from the start, is what are the different roles that people play in a team? What different roles do people take? Well, one role is a task facilitating role. We call this also the task participant. They're concerned with getting the job done. What's our goal? Are we on track? We said we were going to do this, let's get it done. The management and the working of the group. That's the task facilitating role. Need to have somebody in the group that does this, that takes on that role. You may be storming because nobody takes that role. You may be storming because multiple people are taking that role and you can't agree on what should get done. Then there's the relationship. We also call this in principles of management, we call that the socio-emotional role. Is everybody happy? Right? Let's take a break. Anybody want to listen to my playlist? Let's meet at Panera and work on this homework assignment. Those sorts of things. We want to make sure everybody's happy and there's don't like the storming. Let's get through that. That's the socio-emotional role. Then there's the blocking role. In principles of management, we call this the non-participant. If they don't get engaged, they show up late. They're not doing their stuff. You're supposed to have your stuff done on a Sunday night, then, well, it's Monday morning and they still haven't got it in. I have a psychology professor who's a friend, and in psychology there's a great term for that. It's called the social loafer. I love that term. But it's important to identify who's playing what roles. It's important to identify the non-participant or social loafer. Why? Well, they're going to prevent you or stand in the way potentially of you completing your project. If you give them 1/4 of your project and they're, So if you give them 1/4 of your project and they're not participating, ouch. But if you identify them early on, you can accommodate and work around them. You don't give them 1/4 of your project. Everybody does their best and you combine the best of everybody's stuff. And if they don't contribute, then, well, their stuff doesn't end up in the final product. All right. So you got to make sure they're not, as we call it, in the critical path, that you're not depending upon these sorts of people. All right. Well, that's briefly a look at teams and team roles. As I said, we're going to talk much more about this throughout the semester.